and I'm somewhat filming my wrap-up in a timely manner. Hello everyone, my name is Chrissy and welcome to my channel. Today I'm doing my April wrap-up of 2021. I read 4 books for the month of April, and I think that's pretty good given that I was working part-time and going to school and taking care of a little one. Now, did I meet any of the goals or TBRs for April? No, but that's okay. The first book I read is Gingerbread by Helen Oyeyemi. This is a magical realism story that follows this mother-daughter pair, Harriet and Perdita. Really, it follows the grandmother, Harriet, and Perdita. My apologies, I forgot the grandmother's name. But it's primarily about Helen telling Perdita about her childhood and how she met her father. It's a little bit odd. Perdita kind of takes a substance that kind of sort of makes her comatose. Harriet decides to tell her the story while Perdita's in the state. Perdita's not really comatose, like she can actually answer stuff and like her dolls are around her, and I'm pretty sure it's Perdita putting voices into her dolls. It's a little bit odd. This is a bit of a weird story. At any rate, Harriet tells Perdita about her childhood in a town called Druhastrana, and I think that's how it's pronounced. I couldn't really find a good guide on pronunciation. She also tells about her friendship with a gal named Gretel, and also how Gretel plays a really big part in Harriet's life at specific points. And then, of course, how Harriet met Perdita's father. As stated, a very kind of odd book, and it's very set in this magical realism. Like, there's Druhastrana, the town that is a lot more magical than this world. Harriet talks about that place and kind of the odd rules and just general atmosphere of the place. As stated, this is a little bit of an odd book. I gave it an average rating on Goodreads. The things that I like about it, there's some really striking scenes. For example, when Harriet is a gingerbread girl and all of a sudden she comes in contact with these farm girls who come and visit, and just that scene in particular, I don't want to spoil what happens, but that scene in particular just really stood out. Also, the character work with Harriet I thought was really good. Harriet just really wants to make friends and good connections with people, especially towards the beginning of the novel. You can see that, but she's not the greatest at it, and unfortunately people kind of push her to the side, and I thought that was really sad, and that kind of sadness really stood out to me, at least. Things that I disliked about it is that it was a little bit confusing at times. This is definitely a book to read slowly. The transitions of present and past change very abruptly. It just happens in a millisecond in the middle of a paragraph at times, so sometimes that can be really jarring of an experience, and I had to reread a couple of passages because I got a little bit lost. I think due to that confusion, I was a little bit lost on Gretel and Harriet's friendship and how that necessarily pertains to the plot of the rest of the book. But overall, there's some beautiful writing in here, and if you like that magical realism piece, this is definitely a book to try. The second book that I read in April is Dry by Neil Shusterman and Jared Shusterman. This book takes a look at what happens when a community runs out of drinkable and easily accessible water. Southern California ends up having what's called a tap out, where they lose that ability to gain drinkable and easily accessible water. They turn on the taps and nothing. Hence, tap out. Also, bottled water that's sold in stores is quickly gone in a matter of just like hours. All of it is gone in all the stores in Southern California. We end up following this gal named Alyssa as she tries to protect her brother Garrett because her parents went missing after they tried to go and find some drinkable water for them, and she ends up getting the help of her neighbor Kelton, whose family is a lot more prepared than other families to deal with this tragedy. So things that I liked about the story, I thought it was a really interesting scenario. The authors bring up water rights and like if the rivers dried up and other states have to help, how complicated that can be. It's not very long that they talk about this. In fact, it's in like just a few news clippings, but I thought that was interesting that they added that in there. In this book, it's mostly first-person point of view, with it switching primarily between Alyssa and Kelton and then 2 other characters later on. But there's also these third-person scenes that happen, which are kind of these one-time characters that pop up. Those third-person point of view scenes I thought were really good because it adds in a layer of complexity of decision-making that people have to do quickly. Another thing is pacing. I thought it was done really well. There's a big sense of urgency that just grows and person grows with each chapter, and I thought that the authors did a really good job with that. Then there's also some intriguing dilemmas that the characters have to go through. Alyssa as a character is very morally righteous, and then she's put in these positions where she has to finally choose, is she going to protect herself and her brother, or is she going to do what some would think as the morally right thing? Things that I didn't like about the book: I wish that they had kept the first person perspectives between Alyssa and Kelton. They add in Jackie and then later on a character named Henry. Both Alyssa and Kelton go through so much, but sometimes you don't really get to see that shift in mentality between them because it shifts over to Jackie or it shifts over to Henry, and I kind of wish we had stuck with those two main characters. And that's really it as far as what I didn't like about this book. I thought it was pretty good. The next book I read in April is The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. This story follows a caseworker by the name of Linus Baker who goes and investigates orphanages of magical children. He's sent to a very special investigation to this house in the Cerulean Sea, where there is 6 very special children in this orphanage, and he has to make sure that they are safe and that everything's being followed according to plan. One of the reasons why I bought this book is because I heard so many people saying great stuff about it, and I can see why. This does live up to the hype. If you like book tropes that are found family, that are funny and touching at the same time, this is definitely the book to get into. It has some dry humor throughout, so if you're a big fan of that, definitely get into this book. But it also has a lot of heart. There are a lot of moments where I just felt really sad for the characters and what they were going through, and I just wanted them to feel better. It also has some amazing character development, not only in Linus, but also in another guy named Arthur, who is the head of the orphanage. And then the kids themselves are just hilarious. I love all of them. I like that the plot is really straightforward, but it has some really great nuance to that plot line. It's also a really great feel-good book. If you're looking for a book to make you feel warm and fuzzy inside, I would say this would be a good pick. The only dislike I have is that there's not a sequel of one-shot stories of all the characters into the future. I just want to know. A great read and one that I heavily recommend to everyone. And the last book that I read for April is The Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan. This is a really popular book, so I'm surprised if you haven't heard of it or know the summary, but real quick, Percy Jackson finds out that he's half Greek god and ends up on a mission to find Zeus's master bolt. As far as likes go, I just thought this was a really fun read. It's a good middle grade book. I like the characters. This is a middle grade read, and it's a great one to get into. It's really fun. I like the pacing. I like the Greek mythology that's in here, and I know that the author gets into other mythologies later on, which I think is really cool. It's a great starter book. It definitely makes me want to get into the rest of the series, so I will be happy to find those. The only dislike I have is pretty much a personal one and doesn't really reflect on the book itself. It's more that with middle grade books, sometimes descriptions and settings aren't as full as I'd like them to be, but I get why that's the case. It can sometimes mess up with pacing, and sometimes you lose the interest of your audience, and I am not the target audience of these books. So I can understand that. But if you are an adult getting into middle grade, just know that that's going to be a common theme in a lot of books. And that is my wrap up for April. If you've read any of these books or are interested in reading any of these books, please comment down below. And thank you so much for sticking with me in this video. As always and forever, may get lost in a